Now, there are different phases involved during ethical hacking. What phases, what steps ethical hackers are actually following? So the hackers, they follow a standard methodology. And according to EC Council, these are the 5 phases that an attacker, an hacker actually follow while he actually get unauthorized access to your systems. So there are 5 phases of hacking that each and every attacker should actually follow to successfully compromise the system. And the very first phase here is reconnaissance phase, in which the attacker, the bad guy, try to find more and more information about the target just to create the profile of the target. So in this phase, the attacker's objective is to find information. What type of information? So attacker may be looking for the email address information that can be utilized for further attack. Attacker may be looking for the IP address information. Attacker may be looking for telephone number information, mobile number that can be used for further attacks. Like email can be utilized for phishing attack. So an email can be used as an attack vector to send a malicious link to victim, and victim may click on that malicious link that may lead to full system compromise. Or an email can be used to send the malicious attachment. So if the victim download and open that attachment, may get infected with a virus or a ransomware, or may get execute the malicious code on the system. So these information that attacker will be getting in this phase can be used for further attacks. And there are different ways to get this information. Like attacker can actually directly interact with the target to get this information, okay, which is called active information gathering. And attacker can get this information without interacting with the target. So by just going through the publicly available resources, an attacker can try to get the information about the target, right? So recon is the very first phase in which attacker tries to get more and more information about the target just to create a profile of the target. Now he'll be using this information for further attacks. Then the next phase of hacking is scanning phase, in which the hacker's objective is to identify alive systems. Like in recon phase, he found the IP address or the network range of the target, which is being used by the target, right? So in scanning phase, he can try to identify the alive systems in that particular IP range. Okay, suppose he found that C class IP is being used by the target system, okay, target organization. Now in a C class network, there are 254 computers possible. There are 254 devices you can actually connect in a C class network. But out of 254 devices, how many devices are being used? Means how many IPs are being, maybe the target doesn't have 254 devices in their network. Okay, so how many devices are active right now? How many IPs are being used, right? So he will try to identify a live system first of all. Then suppose he found 10 or 15 machines alive, or 10 or 15 IPs out of 254 IPs, those are being used right now. Okay, now he doesn't know what type of devices they are actually. The IP that he found alive belongs to a Windows machine, or it is a Linux system, or it is actually a mobile device, or it is the IP camera. He doesn't know. Maybe it is a printer, right? So he just got information about alive machines or the IPs those are being used. Now he will try to do what? He will try to identify what type of device it is. So he will just identify if it is a Windows system or a Linux system or a printer, right? So after identifying the type of the device, he will try to identify open ports, because the only way to remotely get into the system is open port. If there is no port open, you cannot do anything remotely. An attacker cannot get into the system if there is no open port on the target machine. So the ports are like logical channels through which an attacker can enter your system. These ports are used by the services, okay, like port 80 is used by HTTP. So if the attacker found that port 80 is open, he can just enter the system using that port 80. But the service which is running on that port must be vulnerable. So what an attacker can do actually, first of all, he will try to identify open ports, and based on the open port, he can try to identify the running services also. So if he found port 21 open, it means FTP service is running. If he found port 23 is open, it means telnet service is running. Port 443 is open, it means HTTP service is running. So based on the port, he will just try to identify the running services also. But identifying running services is not the solution actually. It might not be that much helpful. Service version is also important, right? So attacker will try to identify the service version also, not only the services, service version also, because it helps. If suppose attacker found that the target is running SMB on port 445, but he doesn't know which version of SMB the target is running. Okay, so if the target is running SMB2 and attacker try to run an exploit which works on SMB version 1, the exploit will definitely fail. Okay, so he will not only try to identify the running services, but he will try to identify the service versions also. So if he knows the service version, it helps to identify, or it helps to choose the appropriate exploit for that. Okay, and he can just look for the vulnerabilities exist in that particular version of the service. That is also possible. So in scanning phase, attacker's objective is to identify the alive systems, and then he will try to identify the open ports, and then he will try to identify the running services on these ports and the service versions, and then he will try to identify the vulnerabilities exist on this systems, on these services actually, right? Because you can only exploit a vulnerability. A hacker can only exploit a vulnerability. It could be in systems or it could be in humans, right? So he will just look for the vulnerabilities. Now, after getting information about all these open ports, running services, and the vulnerabilities, what attacker can do actually, he can try to get into the system. So by just taking advantage of these bugs, these vulnerabilities, the attacker can try to get into the system, and that's actually the gaining access phase. So that's the third phase of hacking, in which attacker try to get into the system. So suppose attacker found port 23 open in scanning phase, then he can try to perform a brute force attack on port number 23, or he can try to perform a brute force attack on port number 22, which is used by SSH service, and can try to get access to this system. So in gaining access phase, attacker will try to use brute force techniques to crack the passwords and to get unauthorized access to this system. Or maybe in scanning phase, he found that the system is running a service which is vulnerable to buffer overflow attack. So he will try to get into the system by just using an exploit which can take advantage of the buffer overflow vulnerability and can get access to the system, right? So in gaining access phase, attacker will try to use brute force, password brute force techniques, or the buffer overflow exploits he can actually use to get into the system. Now suppose attacker got into the system, okay, by just cracking the password. Maybe the administrator was not using a complex password and it was easy to crack for an attacker and he got access to the system. But possible that the administrator changed the password next day. What is going to be happen in that case? Attacker is going to lose access, right? Attacker doesn't want to do that. Or maybe the administrator set a new password and the password is very complex and it might take hundreds of years for an attacker to crack that password, right? So attacker doesn't want to lose access. So after getting access, attacker will try to maintain his access for future exploitation. So what he can do, suppose he was able to crack the password on uh, uh, you know uh, the telnet service or sss service, then he can install a keylogger on the target system. So even if the administrator change his password, the keylogger will send the password to attacker over the email and there is no need to crack it again. So attacker can still have access to the system even if the administrator changes password. Or maybe the attacker got access to the system by performing a buffer overflow attack on the target system. But may be possible that the administrator fix that issue, fix that vulnerability. Okay, and uh, in that case, what is going to be happen? Definitely attacker is going to lose access and attacker doesn't want to do that. So what he can do after exploiting the buffer overflow vulnerability, he can install a backdoor on the target system. So if the administrator fix the vulnerability, attacker will still have access to the system through his backdoor that he installed on the target machine. This is called maintaining access. So in maintaining access phase, attacker tried to maintain his access for future exploitation by installing a keylogger on the target system or a backdoor on the target system. And finally, because he executed the keylogger or the backdoor on the target system, or maybe he created a user to maintain his access so that he can use that user's credentials to get access to the system. Now these activities might be recorded in event viewer because each and every activity is recorded in event viewer. So by just looking at these events, the administrator may be able to know that someone got into the system and attacker doesn't want to do that actually. So in last phase of hacking, which is covering tracks, attacker will try to hide his identity by just deleting the logs. So he can just delete the logs from the event viewer to cover his tracks so that no one will be able to detect him, right? So these are the 5 phases of hacking and each and every attacker should go through all these 5 phases of hacking to successfully compromise a system. Now let me demonstrate how the attackers are actually doing it, how they are getting information and how they are scanning the systems, how they are gaining access, maintaining access and covering tracks, right? So I will demonstrate it. We will be doing it practically because it's more practical training. Certified ethical hacker is more practical training actually. So 70% practical sessions you will see in certified ethical hacker and just 30% theory, right? So it's more hands-on training program, right? You will get your hand dirty when you join the certified ethical hacker training.
The ethical hacking training is one of the most sought after programs in the cybersecurity space. So, if you navigate yourself to our website www.netcomlearning.com, you could see the promotion section, and what you have here is the free ethical hacking training. So if you have a team of 10 or more than 10, be it your colleagues, your red teams, your peers, your study group, so you can drop us your detail and we will curate a ethical hacking session, a free ethical hacking session for you. And our learning consultant is going to get in touch with you. Said, you can always type, if you are interested in our certified ethical hacking program, you can type CEH and in our search box, and what you find here is you'll have our CH program right here. This is a virtual instructor-led uh, training. So what you have here is our official courseware from EC Council, access to the lab, and also an exam voucher. Again, if you go to promotions page, you would find our uh, offering, which is called the NetCom Unlimited. It's a very fascinating offering. If you look at our pricing, if you are a group of more than 10, you get it for $2,499, and less than 10, you get it for $2,099. And what you get with this is a year's uh, access to a number of courses. You scroll down, you find EC Council's ethical hacking, you find Certified Network Defender, which is also a very popular network security offering from EC Council, and the other ones like SOC Analyst, CSA, ECSS, the ECIH, which is the Incident Handling Program, and that is not the end of it. You also get learning solutions from other vendors as well.